Wolfpack, what's going on? It's your boy, the Wolf of Rose Street. RoseStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves here with a stream on the mid-round blow-up candidates that could swing you your title. So often people focus on, yes, those early round picks. You can't get them wrong. You can certainly lose your league in those early rounds, and everybody wants to find those late round gems, the Kyrans, the Pukas. But actually, it's those mid-rounders, the guys that explode and significantly outperform their average draft position that have historically been the actual title movers. And I have a quick graph we're going to go into, and we're going to dive into 8 names that we see as potential mid-round blow-up candidates for your 2024 drafts. But just adding to the stage with a best ball focus, of course, but this does apply to all your redraft leagues as well. And looking at the players that actually moved teams on into the playoffs for best ball leagues, and there's a very, again, similarity to how often you are likely to berth your regular league playoffs as well if you have these guys. As you can see, over half of these guys, 5 out of 10 right now, were from those picks 50 to 120 range. And it's, of course, you got your CMC, your CeeDee Lamb, your Tyreek Hills. Yes, if you got those guys, it absolutely helped you, but you didn't have really the flexibility to go and pluck those mid-round. That's what I love about these mid-round guys is you actually have a shot at every single one of them, whereas those early round guys, it's kind of what draft slot did you draw out of the hat or whatever you and your league mates do? What did Underdog assign you? Whereas the mid-round guys, you have a shot at all these guys because they're going again. And the guys we're going to talk about in that range of 50 to 120 or so is where you can find these. And you see those names, Raheem Mostert, Nico Collins, Devon Achane, all these guys, Dak Prescott, going in those middle rounds. Mike Evans, a huge one from last year as well. And we're going to go through and try to identify the guys that we see in those middle rounds right now as potential blow-ups that swing you into your best ball, your right redraft, whatever it is that you're watching, the guys that are going to significantly outperform that mid-round, round 6 to round 10 or so price tag. We got 8 candidates. I can't wait to dive into them all. I say we just get going right on it, my man Mo. I love your choice at quarterback, which is where we will start. Mr. Kyler Murray is your choice for the mid-round blow-up candidate. What do you love about Murray at this price?
I mean, Kyler Murray, I just think he's pretty underpriced right now. He's going 78th overall off the board in Underdog Drafts, QB8. So, and he's really the first quarterback off the board, the final quarterback off the board with proven rushing upside. And you can make the argument that Deshaun Watson is the last quarterback off the board with rushing upside, but we can have that discussion another day. I don't really need to be doing that right now. But last season, Kyler Murray, 18.9 fantasy points per game. That was 9th among players with at least 8+ starts. And then taking a look back to the last couple of seasons before that, 2022, 18.9 points per game, 7th overall, 22.2 points per game in 2021, which was 4th. And then 2020 was 24.4 points per game, QB3 in terms of points per game. But last season, it was obviously his worst season in terms of his rank in points per game. But he was dealing a lot with injuries himself as well as the weapons around him. We know Kyler Murray in 2022 ended his season in week 14 with an ACL tear, and then he missed the first 8 games of the season because of that ACL tear in 2023, and that really hampered his performance. He overall, we know him as a rushing quarterback, and he really wasn't able to do that with the effectiveness that he was throughout his career prior to last season. So last season, in 8 games that he played, he averaged 5.4 rush attempts for 29.75 yards. So just under 6 attempts a game for 30 yards a game. Prior to that, we were seeing him get closer to 7 rush attempts a game for almost 40 yards a game. So a significant drop-off last season, and I think that we can attribute that to the recovery from that ACL tear and his lack of needing to scramble just because he was looking to protect that knee, and he just wasn't fully healthy. And not to mention the fact that he was dealing with injuries of the weapons around him as well. His primary receiver last year was Hollywood Brown, who was on and off the field throughout the season, never really looked like himself, dealing with that heel injury that plagued him throughout the back half of the season. So all around, just not really a good offensive environment for Kyler Murray. And he still finished with 18.9 points per game and was the QB9 in that stat in terms of points per game. And now he's drafted as the QB8. So I really think we're getting Murray pretty close to his floor. And now he's got a revamped arsenal of weapons. They brought in Zay Jones through free agency, and they bring in Marvin Harrison through the draft, who I think is considered by just about everyone to be one of the best wide receiver prospects of the last decade. So there's nothing to not to love about Kyler Murray. I think we're going to see an increased rush rate, more attempts, more yards for Kyler Murray, an increased scramble rate, and with better weapons around him, I just don't see how the passing statistics don't get better. So all around, just an improved offensive environment for Kyler Murray, and I think he's just being drafted at his floor, and his ceiling isn't being taken into account.
I absolutely love that call. As you mentioned, that revamp, you saw Trey McBride blow up last year, and now probably the number 2 on this offense as well. And a lot of people question, the work ethic, the Call of Duty. All the reports I've been reading this offseason, Marvin Harrison talked about how he was trying to beat Murray into the practice field, and the Lambo, he says, is always there ahead of him. He can never get there ahead of him because he's the first one in, last one out. So say what you will about Murray and his work ethic, but it sounds like he's a man on the mission from what everybody is saying out there in Cardinals camp. So I am a huge fan of this one. I am definitely with you. We've seen the upside before, and this is definitely the best weapons cabinet he's ever had. The line has also continued to get better and better. So I'm stoked for this one. I definitely agree. Speaking of drafting people at their floors, and this shouldn't surprise anyone who's watched the show, Dak Prescott, to me, is the ultimate bargain in fantasy. The number 1 quarterback last year in advance rate is now going as the quarterback 9, 89.3 price tag overall. That is just absurd. He was the QB1 last year after their week 7 bye, 24 points per game. There was a clear switch to a much pass-happier attack. They were bottom 5 in the league and pass rate over expectation. They finished the season top 3 in that statistic, and ultimately were first in total points, 30 per game, second in total plays, first in pass attempts, first in passing yards, first in passing touchdowns. And again, we're going 9th right now with the quarterback that was orchestrating all that. Makes no sense to me. The fact that he finished as the QB3 overall in fantasy is kind of insane. Given those first 6 weeks, he was borderline droppable, 14.6 points per game, the quarterback 22. That just goes to show how strongly they finished the season there, Dak and the Cowboys' overall offense. He was a whopping top 12 quarterback in 9 of 11 of those final games, 82% of the times in week 8 through 18. In fact, no ceiling, Dak Prescott. He had 30-plus points in 5 of those 11 games as well. And yes, we got CD. That's amazing. He's still there. And no running game really to speak of. Only Zeke Elliott, the corpse of Zeke, being brought back here. Rico Dowdle. So I expect that heavy pass rate to continue on here. And you look at the playoff matchups, Bucks in week 16, Eagles week 17. You can get those late stacks with Cooks and Zeke, even if you don't get CeeDee Lamb. Ferguson, I think we're going to talk about him in a little bit too, going right there in those round 8 or so. So very stackable, great playoff atmosphere. Quarterback won last year when they finally turned the switch. I don't see any reason why that would go backwards. I'm a huge fan of Dak at this price, and I'm buying as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I want to add that you kind of emphasize is the story that they've told this offseason is the fact that they're going to keep up the insane pass rate. They didn't bring anyone in to replace Tony Pollard. So the story that they're telling is that we're going to see another ridiculous amount of passing volume for Dak. And I just don't know how you're not scooping them up at this price. But the running back that I want to get to, not receiver there, is Alvin Kamara. Coming off the board just in the 6th round of drafts and as the RB17, number 67 overall. Last season, he missed the first couple of the games of the season, but ended up being the RB3 in points per game and on the back of ridiculous receiving usage. And I know what everyone's going to say. I mean, yeah, we've got Kendre Miller here. So what are we going to get out of Alvin Kamara? He's just going to be a committee back. But I don't know. He did it last year as a committee back. He was the RB3 in points per game, and he just really wasn't even a bell cow. So last season in 2023, Kamara played 62% of the snaps. This is just in the games that he was actually active for. 62% of the snaps, 53% of the rushing attempts, and 33% of the goal line carries. So he really got it done on just receiving work, and I don't expect that to change. Last season, Kamara, 50% route rate, 34% targets per route run, 3rd among running backs, 6.6 targets per game, 1st among running backs, and 86 raw targets, which was 2nd despite only playing 13 games last season. And I understand that last season was a bit strange. He had 14 targets in 2 games, which is really out of the ordinary. It's just for literally any player in the NFL, let alone a running back. But I think we can still expect 5 to 6 targets per game. And he succeeded last year in a committee role, but by just dominating the receiving work. And I don't see a route or a scenario where he's not once again dominating the receiving work out of the backfield. We know that Derek Carr loves to check it down to the running back, and I just don't see any other player threatening to take away this work that Alvin Kamara is seeing. And even with Kendre Miller entering his second year, hopefully being healthy, I mean, I'm rooting for Kendre Miller to be able to be on the field more than he was last year, but I don't think his presence is going to take away from the role that Alvin Kamara will succeed in. We saw him succeed while only being on the field for 60% of the snaps last year. So I just don't see Kendre Miller coming in and making that significant of an impact. And well, let's take a look at the other receiving weapons that we've got in New Orleans. We've got Chris Olave, we've got Rashid Shaheed, and we've got A.T. Perry. And I don't really think A.T. Perry even counts. He was out there in a full-time role for the back half of the season, and he didn't even manage to earn 25 targets last year. He was playing 70% of the snaps, 80% of the snaps in a lot of these games in the back half of the season, and he was barely earning targets. A lot of those coming from chuck it down the field, I don't care, Jameis Winston. So he doesn't even count. But going back to Olave and Rashid Shaheed, Olave a 3.4 yard ADOT, Rashid Shaheed a 14.2 yard ADOT. Who's catching passes in the shallow and intermediate portions of the field? When it comes to the shallow portion of the field, I still think that's going to be Alvin Kamara. I don't think he's really got a challenger for that role. Yes, I think Juwan Johnson is going to be taking some of those shallow and intermediate receptions, but I think he's a good pick late in drafts, but I don't think he's going to be taking away from Alvin Kamara enough. I still think we're going to see 5 to 6 targets per game for Kamara like we've seen throughout his career. He's going to get some work at the goal line still. So I just don't, even with Kendre Miller coming back, I don't see a big change in the role for Alvin Kamara, and he was able to turn that role into RB3 in points per game last year. So at RB17, I know it might not be like the most sexy pick because he's getting a little older. He doesn't do everything out of the backfield, but he'll still get the receiving work. He'll still get some usage at the goal line. And we've seen what he's been able to do with this usage. And he's going 14 spots lower in terms of the RB running back market than he was last year in terms of his finish. So, I mean, I'm gobbling him up at this price.
And I think one point I think you covered everything necessary other than the fact that Clint Kubiak, the new offensive coordinator there, is from that Shanahan tree. In fact, his dad, Gary Kubiak, is the originator of that zone blocking scheme that you see so many offenses, the Rams, the 49ers, marrying the run and pass, using those running backs in the pass game. We know Kamara's already going to get that, but that beautiful zone blocking scheme already in OTAs, they're talking about how great it's coming together, how much the linemen are loving this. They draft that athletic tackle in round 1 that had played in the zone blocking scheme in college as well. This has made monsters. You look at Gary Kubiak, and sure, it's his son, Clint. It's not guaranteed to be successful like his dad. But ultimately, when Clint was calling the plays for the Vikings, Dalvin Cook had his best rushing season at a per-game basis. We saw the Texans and Arian Foster and Steve Slayton. And, of course, you don't need me to rave about what CMC's been doing there with Shanahan over there. That's where Clint Kubiak comes from, the passing game coordinator over there with the 49ers last year. I think this is a huge boost as well to the entire run game. Clinton is opening comments. This offense is going to be based on the run. That's our foundation here, that zone scheme, just like, again, McVay, Shanahan, getting that going so they can get the play action, get the running backs out in space on screens. I think it's going to be a great system for Alvin Kamara as well. And it's clearly, again, running back 3 last year and maybe not even an ideal situation. The situation improves, and now he's running back 17. I've definitely been taking a lot of Kamara, plus you stack him up with, let's say you start with Adams in round 2, a guy that we've both been targeting. Gets the Raiders in week 17. That game feels a little gross, and also tons of ripe shootout potential. Derek Carr, that check down machine. All of it is phenomenal. I love it. Now, my running back pick, I feel I don't want this to sound hedgy, but I just love both Steelers running backs at their prices. And I'll tell you who's my favorite, but I can make the case for both of them, which I'll do. And I'll tell you who I'm going more often, but ultimately I'm trying to get at least about half and half of these guys in nearly every draft. And that's what I've been doing so far between Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Let's just talk about the overall environment improvements, why I like this backfield to target Arthur Smith for all his faults. And you can certainly bring those up as a play caller, especially as a passing game play caller, and the way he used Kyle Pitts and misused so much of his talent. I get that. Yet when he has been, no matter where he's been, the rushing attack has been very, very solid. The Titans averaging 153.5 yards per game throughout his seasons calling plays in Tennessee. Yes, you have Derrick Henry. I get that, but still, he crafts a very explosive blocking scheme, very unique. The 2022 Falcons went from 31st overall in rushing to 3rd in the league in rushing under his watch. So Arthur Smith, Yes, he has his faults, but as a run game play caller, this guy gets volume and it's nice creative usage as well. And then you look at the line. This is going to be by far the best line the Steelers have had since Najee Harris arrived there. They go with the number 1 guard in Dane Brugler's rankings at pick number 20. Round 2, what do? They go and get Zach Frazier, another beastly tackle. They just completely load up 3 investments in the line this last year, a first-round tackle, Broderick Jones the year before. So they are clearly trying to get back to those roots of Steelers football, and I think they're going to succeed at a massive level. So then you look at Najee, the floor pick, the guy that I certainly want to get on plenty of teams. And I would say I go with him if I don't have a running back through those first 6-7 rounds. This is the one I want to go for because you know he's going to be the starter. You know he's going to eat some volume, and I think he's going to really perform quite well this year. So he is my preferred pick, certainly, especially if I have not taken a running back yet. 250 touches, 1,000-plus rush yards, and 7 touchdowns in every single season so far in his career has been the running back 4, 14, and 22 across his 3 seasons. And I get that, a little bit concerning. It's gone downhill for each of them, and yet right now he is going as the running back 24 in fantasy drafts at pick 86.5. So definitely getting a solid value. He's never finished worse than 22. And I think he's going to have a big rebound. All the talk is because they didn't give him that 5th-year option that he is really motivated. He's already dropped 8 pounds in this offseason. I cannot wait to see what Najee Harris to slim down. And he really finished strong last year, 24.2 and 21.8 points in his last 2 games. Tomlin came out and said, I love to use Najee Harris ultimately in those final weeks when he's bearing down a defense. And that's when we need people the most. You talk about backloaded production, and yes, it's typically rookies. We talked about it on last week's Week 17 episode, but sometimes these bruising type of backs really do end up picking it up when the weather gets cold and it's time for Steelers football. Tomlin has always gone to Najee, and I think he's going to do it again down the stretch. And he was really bad. If you look at his first 9 games, was horrendous. From that point on, though, it seemed like something flipped. He was coming off an injury in camp, really just lagging throughout those first half of the season. But over that second half, the running back 9 in fantasy points from week 9 on, the second half of the season. So I really do like Najee. He is my preferred play. And yet, all that being said, if I'm looking at maybe my running back 2 or 3, I still love sprinkling in some Jaylen Warren because I think the ceiling is significantly higher with Jaylen Warren. If you just look at his efficiency metrics, every single thing that tells you this running back is good, Warren was top 5 in almost every single one of them. First in missed tackles forced per attempt. 3rd in yards over expected per carry in 2023. 3rd in explosive run rate of 15-plus more yards. 8.1% of his carries went for 15 or more yards. 3rd in yard per contact, yards after contact per attempt. 2nd in elusive rating. 2nd in yards per attempt in general. So, again, any metric that says, is this bad good? Warren was in the top 5. And then you look as a receiver. That role seems very secure here. 5th in receptions last year on just the 8th most targets, 74th in the league. Was 5th in yards per route run. So even if he just maintains that quality receiving role, he's going to put up some solid fantasy numbers. We know every touch he gets is going to be maximized. And then you mix in that fact. I know Najee's never missed time, but what if this is the year? And certainly what if it happens in week 15, 16, and 17? You've got Jaylen Warren as the lead runner behind this improved line, and those suddenly we get the volume to match those absurd efficiency metrics. I can't see him being ranked outside the top 5 running backs in that case. This is kind of that a lot of people comparing him to the Tony Pollard of a couple years ago. I think it's a great comparison. It fits perfectly, and that's where Tony Pollard was going when he was just blew up in 2022 and was one of the most highly owned guys on championship rosters. Could see a very similar situation here where whether it's outplaying Najee Harris or ultimately an injury. What if Warren ends up making the starts, taking over this backfield? It certainly could happen. I do love them both. I think they're both severely underpriced. I'm trying to leave every single draft. You get that Week 17 matchup with the Chiefs that has a lot of potential for some fantasy goodness, especially with all the defensive departures this offseason. So I love getting like a Marquise Brown in the middle rounds or Travis Kelce in the round 3-4 turn, and then getting that run back here with one of the Steelers backs is something I've absolutely been hammering in these drafts.
Yeah, 100%. And everything that the Steelers have done this offseason is telling us that they're going to just hammer the ball down people's throats. And they're going in the range of drafts where I'm looking to attack running backs. And in that round 9 or so, 8, between 7 and 9, just generally looking to take running backs. And both of them are going in that range. So, and given the offensive environment and what we think that they're going to do just stylistically, it makes so much sense to be grabbing one of these guys in just a good chunk of your drafts. And something that Pat Crane brought up on his podcast is the fact that even last year, when we weren't in an Arthur Smith offense with like ridiculous run rates and stuff like that, rushing attempts, just raw rushing attempts, both of them could still get there. Last year, we saw in week 17 what Crane points to all the time is Najee Harris, week 17, he had 22, 25 carries, I want to say, 20 plus carries. So he was getting leaned on in that game. He dominated the rushing workload, but Jaylen Warren still got there. He caught a bunch of passes. He found his way into the end zone and put up 18 fantasy points. So there's situations where Najee Harris can still dominate the rushing work and Jaylen Warren can still get there. So I think this is just going to be a very fertile environment for running backs in this Arthur Smith offense. So I'm very much on board with this. I'm looking to pick up these guys in a lot of drafts.
Yeah, great point too. That this is the range to attack running backs. There's a bunch of them in this range. Zach Moss, Raheem Mostert. We could go on and on, but I do prefer those Steelers running backs as well. Now, Wolfpack, we're about to move on to wide receivers. Over 140 of you with us on this random Monday. We'd love to see it. Thank you so much. If you enjoy what you're hearing, that thumbs up button really does help us get out to more people. The likes, the shares, the retweets, all that good stuff. It's how we continue to grow, and we're so happy to have you here. So thank you again so much. And if you're enjoying the content, you find it helpful at all, please do consider that thumbs up button as we move on to our wide receivers, tight ends, and then we're going to be hitting the draft as a lot of you guys are here for. Get the mailbag going. We got a few questions already coming in, but any questions you guys have, sleepers, keepers, redraft, anything at all that we can help you with, please do fill up that mailbag. We'd love to answer those questions while we are drafting. All righty, we are going to move now on to the wide receiver position, talking about those mid-round guys that blow up last year. Mike Evans was a round 6-7 pick that ended up being in the top 5 of advance rates, and you're liking one of his teammates this year, wide receiver Chris Godwin. Why is he your mid-round receiver target that you're loving?
Yeah, so he's not necessarily the archetype of like a player that we're looking for in terms of a blow up, just because he's done it before, but it's hard for me just not to pass up on this value. So let's take a look back at Chris Godwin's performances in the last 5 seasons, going back starting with 2019, which was his true breakout season, just in terms of his finishes and fantasy points per game. 2019 moving forward, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 15, wide receiver 7, wide receiver 15, and then wide receiver 34. So last season was clearly his worst season in recent memory, the last 5 years, 12.3 fantasy points per game, and like I mentioned, wide receiver 34. And this can be attributed to a couple of different things, but the one aspect of his game that really took a hit last year was his slot usage. It was the lowest that it's been in years. He was only running 32% of his routes out of the slot. But this season, we don't have Dave Canales running the show. We all love Dave Canales, the QB whisperer. We love the role that he gave Rachaad White, but his presence in Tampa Bay last year with the Bucs really hampered Chris Godwin. So we've got Liam Cohen brought in as the new Bucs offensive coordinator, and here's just a quick quote that he gave just about 2 weeks ago on Godwin and how they want to use him. So he says, then you've got a guy like Chris that I think can be a really dynamic player on the inside. That's where I envision him playing. Is more on the inside, playing that F position, ultimately like Cooper did. Cooper Kupp is who he's referencing to. Liam Cohen was the assistant wide receivers coach when Cooper Kupp had his breakout year just a couple of years ago. A lot of things run through that, so I'm excited about him, referring to Chris Godwin. So we're already seeing quotes out of the Bucs OC saying they want him to get him in the slot, play a similar role to what Cooper Kupp did for the Rams, which is, I don't want to look too much into that, but that's just incredibly exciting on its own. And then we have let's look at another quote from Scott Smith, a Bucs beat reporter, just talking about Godwin's slot usage and his success as a slot receiver. So this is about his usage in the slot. He was there 51% of snaps in 2020, 53% in 2021, 60% in 2022. Throwing the plays, which Godwin was lined up tight with the line, often to take advantage of his blocking abilities. And now those 3-year percentages are 67%, 70%, and 72%. During those 3 seasons, Godwin ranked 5th in the NFL in receptions per game, 6.5, and 9th in receiving yards per game, 72.3. Godwin also had exceptional catch rates, hauling in 77.4% of his targets in 2020. 77.2 in 2021 and 73.2 in 2022. So his slot rate took a massive hit, and then so did his production. His catch rate was way down. His overall production line was way down. So like I mentioned before, his slot usage was just 32% last year. And in the years prior, we saw him hovering between 50 and 60%. So I think there's a pretty clear correlation. I mean, you just see his overall number of raw receptions went down. He was usually hovering around 100 receptions a year, but last season only 83 receptions. So it's just his usage in the slot. He gets a lot of those layup targets that we always talk about absolutely loving. So I expect if he's going to be back in the slot, just a higher catch rate leading to a higher overall number of receptions for Godwin. So this is just a different role that I expect Godwin to be in versus what he was last year. And he's being drafted as a wide receiver 41, which I think he's just a player being drafted lower than his floor, to be honest. We saw him do absolutely terribly last year in terms of what we're used to seeing out of Chris Godwin. And he was still the wide receiver 34 in points per game, now being drafted as the wide receiver 41. If we see him bump back into the slot, I fully expect him to be, because this is exactly what we're hearing out of the Bucs' new offensive coordinator. So with him back in the slot, I expect to see a higher catch rate, higher overall number of receptions. So I think this is just all setting up for Chris Godwin to return to the Chris Godwin that we've known for years and we've absolutely loved in fantasy.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the wide receiver 2, 15, 6, and 14 in points per game. The Chris Godwin we know and love when he was using that slot role. Now back in it, this year's potential Cooper Kupp and usage, that got me pretty excited and perked up with those layup targets. He's perfect for that mold, that type of role. So if he's used to his absolute perfection skill set, I'm all about this one. I've not been getting enough of Chris Godwin, apparently, given that take, and I absolutely love it. And my case is actually very similar with a receiver finally getting a bit more of layup looks, in my opinion, is how I see this going. That's Calvin Ridley going right now as the wide receiver 36, 64.1 overall. And yet in his career, wide receiver 20, 27, 5, and 20 in his 4 seasons. So getting drafted 16 spots where he typically below where he typically finishes. And I think we could actually see usage that mimics much more closely to that wide receiver 5 finish when he was in Atlanta, getting peppered and getting moved all over the place. Why? Well, he moves over to Tennessee, huge contract, whether you think it's deserved or not. Either way, the team invested mega dollars in this guy because they see him as that true wide receiver 1 alpha. They said that's what Ridley cited as the reason he ended up choosing the Tennessee Titans, because they promised him this role where they will move him all over. And right after they get signed, that's exactly what Brian Callahan says. And let's just talk about the overall offensive environment under Callahan, why I think that's going to be a huge boost for everyone in here, why I'm buying all Titans passing game. I love D-Hop at his price. I think Will Levis, if you watched our value show, that was my quarterback choice for best QB value right now in fantasy, because Mike Vrabel's gone, and for all his traits, exceptional qualities as a defensive-minded guy, hard-nosed coach, I love the guy, but for fantasy, it was not fun. Will Levis never topped 23 pass attempts. He was below 20 in 7 of his 9 games as a starter. And Vrabel, that's just very consistent, bottom 3 in pass attempts in 5 of his 6 seasons calling plays. Meanwhile, Callahan with the Bengals, top in 3 wide receiver sets, top 7 in pass attempts in 3 of 5 years, and in Burr's 2 healthy seasons, top 7 in passing yards and passing touchdowns, with Callahan calling the plays alongside Zach Taylor there. We also had, he's worked Callahan with Stafford, with Peyton Manning, and of course Joe Burrow. So he's got this track record of really efficient high-end passing games. And of course, the big difference there is this is Will Levis, not 3 of the most elite quarterbacks. But if Will Levis is ever going to evolve into something like that, this is the right guy to be coaching him. And I do think he's got those traits. You saw the flashes of the arms. The first game, he had 30 fantasy points when he first stepped onto the field on Thursday Night Football. So I really do think this offense is a great buy low passing attack. And I think Calvin Ridley is going to be the main vein of it. They talked about Callahan. As soon as they signed Ridley, being able to move Calvin around is going to be exciting. I think it's a good group that has some flexibility, particularly with Calvin. I think he's played all over the formation. That's exciting to me. You're looking very similar, as Callahan continued, to a role of what Jamar Chase played in terms of the ability to move around the formation, use him in motion. He's got such a unique skill set, great quickness, great speed. He can run all the routes. He can win inside. He can win outside. He's got a lot of different things he can do well. And I get it. I'm not saying that a Jamar Chase role means Jamar Chase productions. I'm not saying Calvin Ridley is even close to Jamar Chase, but he is a damn good receiver that can get it done, especially when he's getting used properly. Last year with the Jags, again, wide receiver 20 on very subpar usage, was lined up outside on 88% of the snaps on the line of scrimmage for 80% of those. And he really struggled against the press. That he had only a 66% success rate against the press, but also had above 80% win rate on man, right around 80% win rate on zone, was well above average on winning other than against the press. And this is why moving him around is going to be so beneficial here. This is exactly how he was used again when he was with with the Falcons, wide receiver 5 season. And again, even with that subpar usage, top 10 in over 20 fantasy points, and 35% of his games had multiple 30-point days as well. So he had those huge blows, but I think just mixing in a few more of those layup style targets is going to be huge for Calvin Ridley. All the results so far since he arrived there in OTAs, I get it. You're playing without pads on, you're running against air, but all the results so far are he is moving all over the place. He looked explosive coming off the line of scrimmage, caught the ball with ease, and once he was warmed up, love the quote of Ridley was a reception vacuum. Nothing better than reception vacuums in fantasy football. But just again, that similar to your Chris Godwin argument, more ideal usage with those layup style rolls, moved all over the place. He is dangerous. He's so fast. I'm just picturing getting deep out of the slot, more yak opportunities. Everything is, to me, a buy in this Titans passing game, and none more so than Calvin Ridley at that kind of round 5-6 turn. Market-wise, it's kind of that spot where I'd like to have my 4th wide receiver by the end of round 6, and Calvin Ridley's the perfect wide receiver to have in that wide receiver 4 role that can any given week get you those 30-point upsides, and I do think it's going to steady out this year. He really reminds me of what Mike Evans did. He's 29, but says he's like 25 in this season. It really reminds me of why Mike Evans blew up last year. A new quarterback, new kind of overall offensive system that really played to his strengths. Going right in that same price range last year as Mike Evans wouldn't shock me at all. If just like Evans is going around 2 to 3 right now, wouldn't be surprised at all if Calvin Ridley next season is going in those first couple rounds of fantasy because he has a monster blow up, and Will Levis is even better than people thought. So I'm a big fan of Calvin Ridley.
With this draft pick, the question that I'm asking myself is, do I think DeAndre Hopkins is done? Do I think DeAndre Hopkins is bad? And for me, the answer is no. So I think DeAndre Hopkins is still good. So it's been harder for me to get to Ridley because one, he's sandwiched right in like those, not the absolute top tier, not the Neighbors and Harrison, but the secondary tier of rookie receivers. He's sandwiched in there right with Ladd, Rome, and Worthy. So it's hard for me to get to Ridley just because I can get Hopkins a round and a half later, because we're on the same page there that the Titans are the offense, like one of those offenses that I want to get to because I think that there might be overlooked and have the potential to absolutely blow up. But I'm on board with Hopkins, and I can get him a round and a half later while still grabbing one of those upper tier rookies in a McConkey or a Worthy. So I'm not getting to him as often as I probably should be, but just like so I still like Ridley as a player. I'm not out on him, but just structurally and how I'm doing my drafts for the most part, if I'm looking to attack the Titans offense in a draft, I'm usually going Hopkins just because I can grab one of those high upside rookies while also getting a piece of the Titans offense that I think is going to be very relevant and can still earn targets and play a big role. So just like structurally, it's harder for me to get to Ridley, but I like the points that you make. And I think that I should probably mix him in more than I have been recently.
Yeah. And I'm getting tons of D-Hop too. I'm with you. I think he's a great price here. I just look at it. I know Joe Burrow was the facilitator of it. So this is not apples. It's not the same thing. We can't just draw this immediate line, but we did see T. Higgins and Jamar Chase consistently topping out at 140-ish targets there. And of course, you'd want the one. You'd rather have Jamar Chase than T. Higgins, even though both of them would get there for you in fantasy. And that's kind of how I see this playing out. And maybe not. I certainly do like D-Hop. The thing I love doing too, though, is if let's say I do take Ridley round 6, D-Hop is there in round 7 there sitting for you, but I also love going right in that range too is Brian Thomas. You have that week 17 matchup between the Jags and the Titans. So whether you go Christian Kirk in round 5 and then D-Hop in round 7, I just love that game as a week 17 matchup. They also get Indy in week 16. So I see this offense cruising at the time you need them most, 2 good divisional matchups with point potential through the roof. So I really like That's kind of one of the reasons I do like Ridley is you get your piece of the Titans offense. Then you have an explosive rookie in Brian Thomas just going around later. You could get, or Evan Ingram on the Jags as well if you need your tight end sitting there in that round. Either way, I just want pieces of this offense, and I do think Ridley is the highest upside guy, even though, again, I do like the fact that, I could get a piece of this offense a round and a half later, sure, with DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not ruling that out. Sometimes I take them both, but I ultimately love just getting that round 6 to 7 Jags and Titans stack there. Again, whether it's a tight end like Evan Ingram, or we'll consider some other tight ends because we're now moving to the tight end position. I love your call out here, Jake Ferguson. When you're looking through rounds 1 through 8, there are so many good tight ends that are going at really low prices. I think you picked a great one to highlight. So I want to hear what you have to say about him, but I know we've talked about him a few times. It's like this is the cutoff point for tight ends where if you don't get Ferguson, you're kind of looking on the outside to just stacking 3 guys real late. But I think Ferguson is a great, tremendous value right now. I'd love to hear your take on him.
Yeah, so the first thing I wanted to say before getting into this is I really think that personally I can make the case for just about any of the tight ends going between 50 and 100 in terms of them being a value. And those guys are Mark Andrews, who you're going to get to, Kyle Pitts, Kittle, Ingram, Ferguson, and Njoku. I just think that the tight end market being so depressed this year from where it was last year just pushed down draft boards. There's just a case to be made for the upside of all these guys. But I really like Jake Ferguson just because outside of those guys who aren't playing a true tight end position like Mark Andrews, like Travis Kelce, who they're being more heavily used as receivers. I think as a true tight end, I think Jake Ferguson offers the most intriguing upside out of all of them. So first off, his price going 85th overall as the tight end 9, but this season it's an incredibly thin receiving room. It's somehow gotten even thinner from last year. So this season they've got Lamb, Ferguson, and Brandon Cooks, who's entering his age 31 season. I know we talk about him being a good, not necessarily a good pick, but an interesting pick, just because he's presumably the second option or will be regularly involved in this offense that we expect to have pretty high passing volume, a high pass rate. So Cooks is an interesting option, but at the end of the day, he's entering his age 31 season. And then it's a mystery at the wide receiver 3. They've got Jalen Tolbert, Kavonte Turpin, and a guy we talked about, Ryan Flournoy. So we really don't know what we're getting. It's just a really thin receiver room, and there's 3 primary options, and there's a case to be made for Ferguson to be that second option. So it's already a great environment for Ferguson to earn targets, and he earned targets consistently last year while Michael Gallup was on the team. And I know we don't think much of Michael Gallup, but he's definitely a more consistent wide receiver 3 than any of the other options that I just mentioned. So last season, he was getting consistent usage as a receiver. He took on a full-time role almost right away, and he made the most of it. He was running a high percentage of the routes in almost every game, 72% across the entire season, 72% route rate. He was averaging on the nose 6 targets per game, and he had 12 games with at least 5 targets. So that's really consistent usage out of a tight end. We see guys at the tight end position just super inconsistent. The guy that always comes to mind for me with this is Cade Otton. He's out there running like 85, 90% of the routes every game, but some games he's got 10 targets and another game he's got 2. So the 12 games with at least 5 targets is really not necessarily intriguing, but it's promising for Ferguson because he gets such consistent usage, and I just don't see that changing in terms of his role in 2024. And then outside of consistent usage as a receiver throughout the field, he gets really high usage in the red zone. And that's really what we're looking for at our tight end position. The weeks that they're going to hit our lineup is the weeks that they find the end zone. And we talked about that being important in week 17, but that's important throughout the season. If they're just able to find the end zone and you get lucky on the week that they find the end zone, they're going to hit your lineup more often than not. And he gets usage in the red zone. He was first in among tight ends. Ferguson was first in terms of targets from inside the 20, first from targets inside the 10, and second in terms of end zone targets. So end zone targets being Ferguson was actually in the end zone when he was targeted. So he gets consistent usage. We've seen throughout the entire Dak Prescott era, we've seen the Cowboys use play action at the goal line and then leak out a tight end that's just wide open for a touchdown. And it's not always going to be Jake Ferguson. There's guys like Luke Schoonmaker and Peyton Hendershot. You always see that white tight end, number 80 something, and you think it's Ferguson, but it's not always him. But so that's going to happen. But Ferguson's going to be used at the red zone, in the red zone, at the goal line, used in those play action sets, those 12 personnel sets. So I'm really excited for the role that Jake Ferguson had last year and what he'll continue to have in 2024. And who knows, maybe we see some more consistent use, not more consistent, but a higher usage rate for Ferguson without a clear third option in that offense. And he was already getting great usage in terms of a tight end last year. So I just I liked what I saw last year. I don't see a massive change in terms of what I expect for him to be doing in 2024. And I think there's even more room for his role to grow.
Yeah, he actually finished third in routes, 511 last year, and that was despite the first 4 weeks of the season. He was only running about half the routes. It wasn't really until week 5 that he started playing 75 to 80% of those pass plays, and then it was just pure blast off from there. So it definitely has room to just start the season stronger. You mentioned it seems like every single year, whether it was Dalton, Schultz, Jason Witt, there's always a Cowboys tight end just doing damage, especially in the red zone, and it was Jake Ferguson time and time again last year. I'll just reiterate those points on Dak Prescott we made. This offense was first in total points, first in pass attempts, first in pass yards, first in passing touchdowns. And as you said, we don't really know if Brandon Cooks is actually the number 2. It could certainly be Ferguson. If the playoffs were any indication, it's a low ceiling pick, right? He had 37.3 fantasy points his last time out there against the Packers, absolutely putting a monster exclamation point on the season with 3 touchdowns, 10 catches on 12 targets, 93 yards. So you're telling me the guy doesn't have a ceiling? I don't buy that at all. Been working out with George Kittle in the offseason, been invited to the George Kittle tight end camp, the infamous one, where we've seen so many breakouts happen. So I'm all about it. I think Ferguson is a great pick. If he finishes a top 5 tight end by the time the season was over, I mean, to me, I value him and Kyle Pitts very similarly, but Kyle Pitts goes 25 picks earlier than him. I love the Jake Ferguson call. I am fully with you. It's a great way, even if you don't get CeeDee Lamb, let's say you're sitting there in that round 8 range and you don't have a tight end yet, you can pluck Jake Ferguson. You can get Dak on the way back, and you can still get a nice little Cowboy stack there. I'm a huge fan of this call. I love Ferguson. I've been definitely loading up more and more on him. And you kind of alluded to it, but I picked Mark Andrews. Whoa, Wolf, how bold of you. A guy that was the tight end 1 just 2 seasons ago. You're calling it a mid-round breakout. But you kind of also summarized why I wanted to put him on here, because I think maybe the single biggest market inefficiency right now in best ball drafts is the elite tight end prices. You're getting Kelsey in round 3 to 4 turn. Sam Laporta a little bit mispriced going at the round 2 to 3 turn, in my opinion. But all these other guys, whether it's Trey McBride, Travis Kelsey, and of course, again, Mark Andrews, in my opinion, going right now in round 5, I think is an absolute steal. Even if you just got what he did last year before getting hurt, 67% of the time was a top 6 tight end, a tight end 5, tight end 1, tight end 4, tight end 5 across the last 5 years. So the floor is really solid there. For a 5th round price, last time we took Mark Andrews in round 5 was the year that he was, again, the tight end 1, was actually the single highest owned player in best ball finals and best ball semifinals, was the top 5 in total advance rate as well. He had 26.6% target share and 30% targets per route that season. And yeah, I get it. Maybe this is not going to be the case moving forward because Zay Flowers look damn good. But we also have an offense with Todd Monken where L-Jack set career highs with 457 pass attempts, 3,678 pass yards. And this was the first year in that system. Who says that it doesn't take another step forward? They played at a really fast pace. They only had 24 passing touchdowns. We've seen Lamar throw for nearly 40 touchdowns. So what if he gets closer to that number and this offense just hums at a completely different level in the year 2 of the system? That is totally possible. What if the defense, this offense was going nuts as a passing game, and that was with a elite defense? What if the defense, who lost a couple key pieces and didn't really add much this offseason, what if they take a step back? And suddenly that's what kind of happened in that Mark Andrews tight end 1 season, where they just had to chuck to keep pace, and we might see that. It's certainly within the range of outcomes. So at minimum, you just know that this guy has been a true league winner, game changer just 2 seasons ago. We know that ceiling outcome exists, and yet we can get it in round 5, which to me, again, we talk about buying players at their floor. If you got just a tight end 5 season in round 5 with what he did last year, you'd be okay with it. And he didn't take too big of a step back. 22% target share, 22.6% targets per route run, 2.01 yards per route run, was top 3 in the league last year, 8.9 yards per target, 4th in the league. So the efficiency metrics were all still checking all the boxes, was on pace for over 900 yards and 10 touchdowns before breaking that Fitbit. Was easy top 5 in points per game last year. So I absolutely think this is a buy him at his floor with a ceiling that has truly, again, nobody was on more teams in the finals that year 2 seasons ago. And this offense is humming at a faster, more pass-happy pace than even that team was. And you look at Week 17, Houston in a dome, who just got routinely bludgeoned by tight ends last year. And yeah, I get defenses change year over year, but that just matchup in general feels so juicy. You can often get Lamar in round 4, and then somehow Andrews is making his way back to you after you've taken 3 wide receivers to start your draft. I mean, I've had a few builds like that. It feels like a cheat code to have that type of tight end and quarterback play with 3 great receivers already drafted. I'm going to continue to try to build teams like that. It's amazing. So I love this value, and I get it again. It's Mark Andrews. How bold, Wolf, a blow-up candidate. But the fact that he's going in round 5 is just as shocking to me. I think this is one. I want to just, again, highlight that this is one of the biggest edges right now in these best ball drafts is getting elite tight end. Whether you take one in round 4, round 5, I'd say buy kind of Kincaid. Maybe he becomes that number 1 offense of weapon there for the Bills in the passing game. But I'd rather have Andrews certainly at his price tag. And I just, it's the big thing you think everybody should be exploiting right now is these elite tight ends. And if you miss him, I do love the Jake Ferguson call. I think he's a great potential guy to ascend into this round by the time next year. But I still want to get that round 5 guy if I can. And if it's Mark Andrews, I love it. I love every second of it.
Yeah, and the only other point that I wanted to make there is there's so many different ways to attack that Houston Baltimore matchup that we really like in Week 17. You've just got so many guys going in rounds 1 through 5 there that you can attack it in just so many different ways. And like we've said time and time again, that this the elite tight end is something that we're really interested in just because of how pushed down the market has been since last year. I mean, we had 2 guys going in the first 2 rounds. You saw Andrew going in round 2 all the time. Kelsey was the staple round 1 pick last season. So it's very attackable, especially when you can get Mark Andrews at pick 50. It's just kind of ridiculous that he's available in this range. And like I said, there's just so many different ways you can pair him with other Ravens or with the Texans offense. So just a very interesting pick all around. And I just think his price is egregious in my opinion. He should not be available in round 5, and especially when you can grab Lamar in round 4, and then there's just not as much appeal for other drafters to grab him there. So he often slips back to you in round 5.
Yeah, and if anything else, Pat Kerrane has talked about how he's one of the best picks, and if you're not going to trust us, trust the guy that's won $3 million playing best ball before. If he loves him, I love him too. So I think it's a great pick again, and just in general, the elite tight ends are such a great stab. So I would definitely like both of these guys for sure. We have now 2 more people to fill the draft. So, hey, if you're watching and you want to join us, come on down. 2 spots left to fill. We'll definitely answer some questions now while we're waiting for this thing to fill up. And we can definitely talk about, too, maybe some other names that, we don't have as prepared of takes on, but other mid-round guys we find ourselves landing a lot. But yeah, as Mark G says, working on a holiday, the best in the biz. Great to see you, Gonzo. Thanks for showing up, my guy. Love to see it. Crystal Ball warmed up. Keaton Mitchell get a full recovery and recover that bottled lightning ability. Ask Jaws. It's an interesting one. It's tough for me to draft him right now. I mean, you also have Derrick Henry certainly eating up every snap there. For the most part, they could be an amazing lightning and thunder type of backfield. That could be the case, sure. But it's tough for me. It was such a late season injury. And I don't know, though. Keaton Mitchell does kind of fit the bill of like backloaded production. What if he comes back week 8 or so and he does have that ability? Man, I mean, only Achane had better efficiency numbers when you account for 30 plus carries. I still, though, I don't know. I have a hard time. As much as I loved watching the guy in those limited snaps, just given how late everything happened, it's been really tough for me to click Keaton Mitchell. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Keaton Mitchell? Is that somebody you're interested in because of how electric he was?
Not at all. I'm not interested in Keaton Mitchell whatsoever. He's come down like a full round since BBM opened. So he's basically a last round pick now, which is where he should be going. But the recent news on Mitchell is just not interesting. It just doesn't paint a picture at all. This was a couple of days ago, just quotes coming out from Harbaugh. He's going to begin jogging next week. Like, that's what he's doing, and this is the phase in his rehab that he's at. And they're, quote, optimistic that he's going to return at some point during the season. Like, none of this is painting a picture of someone I want to be taking a swing on, that he will hopefully be available and ramping up in the best ball playoffs. Like, if he can come back at some point, like, even if he's available, what condition are we going to see him in when he's available to return? So I don't know. Yeah, there's just other guys, like, and it's in the range of drafts where you're probably taking a guy more often than not who's not going to be hitting your lineup very often, or it just is a total zero. But I don't know. There's better bets to take than a guy who will maybe be available to play 5-6 games for your roster. And even if he can play that many games, like, who knows what state he's going to be in health-wise and how effective he's going to be, because he's one of those guys that contributes on limited touches because he's so explosive. And I don't know. I just don't want to take a bet with a limited workload with no certainty that he's going to even be available.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. And I feel like there's plenty of intriguing running back picks going. If it's the speed, the lightning ability that you want. I mean, Isaac Grendo, a Shanahan system right now, if something ever happened to CMC, and maybe even if not, I could see him definitely ripping some big plays in a well-designed offense. So if you really want that lightning ability, I think Grendo makes sense there. I love Dylan Labe, who doesn't quite have that speed, but I think he's a 50-plus catch candidate right off the jump here, and it's not an impossible depth chart to supersede here with Zamir White, really the only guy ahead of him. Amir Abdullah, I'm not going to even entertain the fact that guy's going to see work over Dylan Labe. So there are some guys that I just am plenty intrigued by in that range, that I don't need a guy that might just be a pure zero. If we get better reports in training camp that, maybe by midseason and whatnot, I do love what I saw from Keaton Mitchell. So I'm not going to completely rule him out. But this early in drafting, when we don't have much information, this is the type of guy that I really don't want to target until we learn more about what's happening there. So we are pick 10, and we are now on the clock here. So at the top of the hill is A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Jahmyr Gibbs.
It's A.J. Brown for
guys.
me.
What's that?
It's always A.J. Brown for me here.
Yep. I am the same exact boat.
Yep.
I love people aren't really talking a lot about like Kellen Moore coming there. And I know that it was a little underwhelming last year with the Chargers, but you saw what they did with the Cowboys there. What if A.J. Brown becomes that kind of CeeDee Lamb slot receiver? He could get I'm just foaming at the mouth thinking about him seeing 150 targets finally, which he's been getting good volume. It's just so steady. It's so safe. A.J. Brown is so damn talented that it's a no-brainer for me. I'm fully with you there.
I'm finally starting to see some A.J. Brown should be going ahead of Puka Nacua discourse, and I'm all the way behind that. There's no one's talking about A.J. Brown back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons. Like, it's kind of ridiculous that no one's like even mentioning that. And I get that the offense stalled out. We're on the clock here. Who do you like?
I'm going to go Marvin Harrison. Keep going.
Yeah,
I know you'd be on board. We talked about Kyler already. Hopefully he falls to us. Let's let it rip for sure.
But yeah, so I understand that they stalled out last year down the stretch, but like you said, a receiver or an offensive coordinator that we really like in Kellen Moore here in Philadelphia now, and A.J. Brown, we know he's this absolute physical specimen, just a total beast, just all around. And he's done it time and time again. He had 1,400 receiving yards back-to-back seasons, almost 1,500 receiving yards in 2022. Puka Nacua, a rookie who was, I don't want to discount the talent of Puka Nacua, but he definitely benefited.
There will be no Puka slander on this podcast.
Yeah,
you can make your take, but I will not accept any Puka Nacua slander.
No, but I don't think anyone's going to deny that he benefited from the fact that there was a hampered Cooper Kupp last season. I think that, I still agree that he's a very talented receiver, but I don't know. I feel like just A.J. Brown's a different beast, and he put up very similar numbers to Puka Nacua in terms of his just total stat line last year. So the love for Puka Nacua is very legitimate, but I don't know, the him going ahead of A.J. Brown consistently in drafts, it doesn't make sense to me.
I actually do have A.J. Brown higher than Puka Nacua for what it's worth too. So I'm fully there with you. I'd rather have A.J. Brown. We've seen him do it time and time again. And that's not me thinking that Puka was a one-year wonder. I think Puka's going to be a beast, but
Yeah,
I totally think
100%.
the idea of like Cooper Kupp comes back better than ever. All these offseason reports are he's working out like insanity, trying to come back for the Triple Crown. Like there's definitely a non-zero chance that Cooper Kupp is the actual alpha dog in this wide receiver core, and they both have great years. But ultimately, the more valuable guy ends up being Cooper Kupp there this year. Maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe Cooper has injuries again. We saw in the playoffs when both were relatively healthy last year that Puka was the guy that stepped up. But certainly a world where we could see Cooper Kupp reclaim it. I don't see a world where, as good as Devonta Smith is, he ever overtakes A.J. Brown as the clear number one guy here. He's just too damn good. He's been so damn good his entire career, even better since he's paired up with Jalen Hurts. It's such a nice, easy stack as well to make here. We could even maybe potentially land Devonta Smith if he falls to us and stack both those guys up with Jalen Hurts. One thing a lot of people are kind of forcing when they have A.J. Brown is, and we saw him here go at 17, Saquon Barkley. I don't get it. I like Barkley fine, but a lot of his metrics last year just not very efficient. And are they suddenly just going to stop doing the tush push? Like that's why Miles Sanders, yeah, he was pretty good, but always had a Caps touchdown ceiling. And last year, there's really no great running back. Swift had so many like solid games, but never sniffed the end zone. And yeah, I guess Saquon's a little bit more built for that pounding, but I'm not in the camp that you have to force in Saquon Barkley, make a full stack here. I think he's one of the more egregiously overpriced guys, going ahead of like Devon Achane, insanely efficient runner, going ahead of receivers like Marvin Harrison at many times. So I'm not in the camp. I like forcing a stack here. I like, unfortunately, Devonta Smith is already gone, so we're not going to be able to do that. But I'm not in the camp like you go A.J. Brown and it's such an easy click to go Saquon Barkley. To me, I think he's significantly overpriced. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on him?
I think I've made this take on the show before. I am not a fan of Saquon Barkley at cost. I grabbed him in a draft earlier this week, but he fell back to me at like 22 or 23 is where I grabbed him. I like him more at the back of the second round. I am not a fan of him, and we've talked about it time and time again, or not time and time again, but at length, just not forcing the stacks that by pushing players up, especially in these early rounds. And I don't feel the need to do that just because of how I feel about Saquon Barkley. We've historically seen not a big role for running backs in the receiving game here in Philadelphia. And I'll keep making my point. Who do you got queued up here?
So neighbors almost fell to us, which would have been really intriguing. But I also have Cooper Kupp queued up. We got the Week 17 correlation. We just talked about how he might be the number one guy here.
Yeah, let's go for it.
I obviously getting Jalen Hurts here to solidify the stack is the safe play, and it would suck to watch him go within these next few. But I don't know. I'd be kind of surprised. I think most of the time people, if Devonta Smith was still on the board, somebody might take Smith and then go Hurts. And again, we might lose out on him. But ultimately, I think there's a decent chance. We got two more to make it through. And if he goes, he goes, and it sucks. But we'd have like Tank Dell or Zay Flowers waiting for us either way. So, I think Cooper Kupp was a solid play. The Week 17 correlation could be their wide receiver one. It could just be we get Cooper 2 years ago. Cooper Kupp was the kind of Andrews argument we were talking about. If you had Cooper Kupp, you had a 47% chance of just advancing, like just one player. And of course, Jalen Hurts goes the pick before us, which does suck. I would have loved to have that. There's Zay Flowers. There's Derrick Henry. I don't know if I love going Henry. I don't mind Zay Flowers here, though. What do you think?
Honestly, I'd rather go Henry, but
that's fine with me.
I'll leave it up to you there. What are you going to do about Hurts going there? I mean, this guy, he's addressed both onesie positions and grabbed a running back through 4 rounds. You can't really do anything about that. That's just, in my opinion, bad roster construction. I was making a point on Saquon Barkley, though. It's an offense that, since Jalen Hurts has been around, not really use running backs in the receiving game. And you look at Saquon's effectiveness as a receiver, and maybe that's part of the offensive environment, but his effectiveness as a receiver, good, not great. Like, everyone thinks of him as this game-changing receiver because, he can break off a big play at any point in time. So he's got it, but his yards per route run is just efficiency as a receiver. It's nothing insane. It's not off the charts. So He's not, and I don't expect him to see a ton of usage as a receiver. And then, yet again, the goal line stuff. So the early second round price for Saquon is something that I can't really get behind. But one thing that I've been keeping my eye on in this draft, to change topics here, is the guy in the 1 slot. He goes Christian McCaffrey 1 overall, Achane at the back of the second round, and then Laporta with the first pick of the 3rd round. And we talked about, I kind of want to ignore the Laporta pick here. We talked about how we don't like pushing up Laporta as the first pick of the 3rd round just to get him with McCaffrey. But I've been experimenting with the McCaffrey Achane start, and you kind of get behind the 8 ball at receiver because you start 2 running backs. And obviously, I said I don't like the Laporta pick. When I'm doing McCaffrey Achane starts, I'm grabbing receiver there with the first pick of the 3rd round. But do you think that it's possible to put together a competitive roster going running back there?
I've been experimenting more so on DraftKings. I think it's very possible because there's just been some great receiver values throughout. On Underdog, especially at least drafting this early, you're drafting against people that really recognize that if you study any type of like advance rates, successful teams, it's almost always comes down to wide receiver firepower. And so if this guy had gone, if you're going to do that, which I think you can, because we're talking about legendary upsides at running back is what you want. You know, the coined by Pat Crane, the guy we keep referencing, the $3 billion winner. Those guys have it. Christian McCaffrey and Achane, like there's very few running backs that can actually hit 30 any given week and just spike. And Achane, as efficient as he was, like, it was insanity last year. So I'm all about taking shots at that. I'm fine with it. But then when you go Laporta with it, you know, you're really limiting what type of wide receiver firepower you can get. Like had he gone, Evans was gone, Waddle was gone, but you know, Diggs, DK, any of those guys, I don't love them, but DJ Moore, even, you know, whoever it might be, you have the chance to go Cooper and like George Pickens or Cooper Reed, how he did it here. If you go running back, and then 3 receivers and maybe even, you know, whoever's there at 72, if it's DeAndre Hopkins, you know, Brian Thomas, I think you can pull it off. But once you invest that tight end spot, it's kind of the opportunity cost there. And maybe this guy is able to hit like a Tank Dell, a Puka Late and make up that ground. And then, damn, this team is like impossible. I like the move. I'm fine doing it, but it really does leave you behind in wide receiver firepower. But you look at the receivers that went, like I would have, if I was in this guy's shoes, baby needs shoes. Baby needs shoes. Funny name there too. But ultimately, like the receivers that were there for him, I totally get why he went Achane. This is probably wasn't going to be a receiver move for me. If I was there, I probably would have gone Achane and then maybe have gone Diggs and tried to get some of that Houston attack. Or I'm fine with DK Metcalf or Malik Neighbors if you really want to take a stab at some upside. Because I do really like Cooper there. I think Cooper's a great price. Pickens didn't fall, but you know, Kirk was almost right there too. Those are guys that do make it very possible. But he is. We'll see how his receivers turn out. It's definitely one to monitor. But I think if you're going to do it, you have to go 3 to 4 straight receivers after you've gone running back.
I think there, if you're going running back, specifically McCaffrey, Achane, because that's kind of like the running back start you see at the 1 slot. You kind of have to go at the 3rd pick. You got to go either Moore or Metcalf, in my opinion, DJ Moore and Metcalf, because you're setting yourself up. You really can't afford to take a quarterback until round 8 or so. And if you grab Diggs or Devonta Smith, and Hurts really isn't going to make it back to you there at the back of the 4th round very often. But
we got to make our pick real quick. I love Terry McLaurin here. I know we're both kind of loving where he's been.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Cool. So we'll make that pick and then figure it out from there. So yeah, keep on rolling there. But yeah, you do get a nice little week 16 correlation with AJ Brown and Terry there as well. So not bad.
You just can't afford to take a quarterback in the early rounds. So more specifically, you just can't grab Diggs or Collins if he's there, maybe. So because then you're kind of really wanting to take CJ Stroud. So you got to set yourself up for your roster to grab a quarterback later. So if you're going to do that McCaffrey Achane start, I like grabbing Metcalf or DJ Moore there because you can grab Geno Smith really late, or you can grab Caleb Williams in the mid round. So that's just kind of my thoughts there. But I think going the running back start and then grabbing Laporta is just it's really hard to recover from.
Yeah, we'll see again what receivers end up falling to him. On DraftKings, it is doable because, again, there's so many absurd values, but very sharp drafters right now on Underdog that if you find yourself behind on receiver, it can be very tough to catch up. So at this point, we have Joe Mixon available to us with the Derrick Henry correlation. I kind of like that. Kyle Pitts is there. I'm not a huge Pitts guy, but Terry McLaurin, week 17. And then, of course, my guy Calvin Ridley we talked about earlier. So those are the three I've signaled up: Mixon, Ridley, Pitts. Which one do you like?
I'm fine to go with your boy Ridley.
All righty. I'm going to put him up here. Yeah, I like getting Ridley here and seeing what type of Jags might end up moving to us. I want to go Pitts just for that week 17 correlation, and I still feel myself being so trigger shy. And maybe it is Kirk Cousins is the skeleton key. We've seen him be it for obviously any receiver really in his career. Like it doesn't matter who it is. He always feeds his weapons. So I really do think Pitts could become a monster. But, oh, man, like I just don't know if I buy it. Like, is Pitts really going to be that good? He had that 1,000-yard rookie season that suggests, yes, he is. But we haven't seen much since. So I don't know. The upside's astronomical. That might be when we look back at like, damn, that week 17 correlation could have been nice. Same with Mixon too. But are we not getting similar value with whatever Steelers running back we decide to choose? Like, I think there's Mixon's not this humongous tier above, and like correlating running backs honestly doesn't usually end up being the correlation you want anyways. So I'm fine passing on Mixon. Those are three guys I really like. And of course, my boy Ridley. I've already raved about him enough, so I think it's a solid pick. I'm good with it.
And I don't want to say I'm worried about Mixon just because the offensive environment is so good, but in terms of the bet that you're taking with Mixon, like you need him to just dominate the touches in that backfield because that's what he did in Cincinnati. You got Zach Taylor in Cincinnati, the head coach, out of the Sean McVay tree, and we've seen how McVay just loves to feed one running back. So yeah, and then Joe Mixon.
Well, Slowick's from the Shanahan tree too, though.
Yeah.
Who's there? Damian Pierce. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Like, is Damian Pierce gonna? I think Mixon's going to be a real nice pick, but
and they gave him the contract that backs that up. It's just, I think we can all agree Joe Mixon at this point in his career just not that great. Like
no.
he rode insane usage. Like he was really only behind like McCaffrey and Kyron last year in terms of just like the overall usage that he was able to take up. So he was like the only receiver, dominated the rushing work. So I don't really know about Mixon. I don't think he's a shoo-in to absolutely dominate the touches. So we'll see. But that's just like the really only concern with Mixon is just that's just my thoughts there.
I think it's a very fair concern to bring up. And I wasn't sold on him. And again, I would have, if it was up to me to make the pick alone, I would have gone Ridley. So I think we got the guy that I would have gone to. Again, Kyle Pitts intrigues me, but it's not. I don't know. I get that you can't always wait to see it before you get back in, but I'm kind of there with Pitts. Like I haven't really ever gotten on, and it's never really burned me. So maybe this is the year where I don't hit it, and it does crush me. But I don't know. I'm not overly concerned. I think it's fine, and I do love the play there. So coming back here, we have a nice question from Jaws in terms of another reclamation project. I don't know that we'll need to spend too much on that because my answer is neither. It's Rashad Penny and Chase Claypool. If I have to pick one of them, I think, Claypool's in Buffalo where it's a fertile environment, Josh Allen. So like if Claypool we saw as a rookie, insane deep threat, like ridiculous, big plays, maybe that ignites in Buffalo. I don't expect it. Reports and OTAs are good. So in like dynasty leagues, if he's sitting out in waiver wires, I've been actually kind of scooping Claypool. Penny, I don't ever want to touch again. Like couldn't do it on an Eagles team that needed running backs throughout last year, barely even sniffed the field. So now in Carolina, they have Chuba, Jonathan Brooks, of course, who we love. Like I don't see much happening there. Unfortunately, Kyler Murray, I was just going to say, unfortunately, he's gone, but no, he's still sitting there.
I was going to say Murray here and then Ferguson on the way back.
Yeah, Fergie makes it back to us, and the guys in front of us, 2 tight ends on one team, one on the other.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, Kyler to stack up Marv. I hope that Ferg makes it back because then we got week 17 in play as well. If he
Yep.
doesn't, I'd like to queue up maybe Najee or Warren, but
Yeah, probably running back here if we don't grab Ferguson.
Ferg fits this build really well. I was gonna say even if Murray had gone, I would have been just as fine going Ferg than Prescott.
Yeah.
With our picks, but there he is. So yeah, I think this is we're getting our boys that we just talked about. This kind of worked out awesome. Like our mid-round guys, we've got.
We're having all the guys in the mid rounds.
I know, and honestly, if we were gonna make I know before, we're gonna kill time about what other mid-rounders would we talk about. McLaurin would have been one of the other receivers. You talked about it last show in terms of the RPOs. I know JJ Zachariason was talking about it on his pod, and the first kind of target read in RPO offenses is so heavily that number one guy. And I think McLaurin has the ability. We've all kind of been waiting for it to finally come to fruition. But with a rookie quarterback this year, maybe this is the season that we finally see that. So I'm a big fan of
just the absolute nonsense that we saw in Washington last year. Like you got John Bates running routes every week and Alex Arma getting targets.
What are we doing?
Just total nonsense out of Eric Bieniemy. He was running it like he had the receiving core that the Chiefs had post Tyreek Hill. Like you've got Terry McLaurin, you've got Jahan Dotson, who people like. I mean, I don't know. It was strange. It made zero sense to me, and I'm hoping Cliff Kingsbury is able to rein it in.
I think he will too. We saw how concentrated his offense is. Speaking of RPOs, his offense was an RPO offense with Kyler Murray in those top 5 years, and DeAndre Hopkins, absolute target animal. And then other than when DeAndre Hopkins was hurt, Marquise Brown had a 17 target day, and he had multiple 10+ target days when he was the number one guys. Like that's Marquise Brown, who I actually love with the Chiefs. Like there is that pocket where Ridley went with McLaurin, Marquise Brown, and again, the Ridley who I highlighted. I love that pocket of receivers. And I think that is, if you get one of those guys as your fourth, you're in great shape. And we ended up getting Ridley as our fifth. So I think we're in really good shape with wide receiver firepower. It'll be interesting to see how our wide receiver room ends up turning out. Our running back room, because I do think there's still plenty of great values where it might be Chase Brown, my highest owned player right now, Gus Edwards, famous last words for sure. But we'll see how that ends up panning out. There's plenty of running backs though. We have Henry as a running back hero. I mean, in a half PPR setting too with Underdog, I'm very happy to have Henry in round 4 after I've taken 3 really solid receivers. I mean, that who says Henry doesn't run for 20 touchdowns this year? Gus Edwards had the league high in rushing touchdowns last year. This is Derrick Henry, folks. Who also had, we've talked about him before, but he's not cooked. I think he had 3 of the top 5 fastest ball carrier speeds, 3rd or 4th in terms of explosive run rate. Henry still has it. Now he's on a Ravens team. It's scary good fit. Looking back at a baby needs shoes, he has gone and gotten 4 straight receivers, then Jordan Love, and then another receiver. I don't love this receiver room. I mean, our wide receiver 5 is Ridley, and his is Curtis Samuel.
It's scary.
It's scary, yeah, absolutely. Especially because I'm not a JSN fan myself. I guess that's the type of bet, though, you kind of have to make is JSN was this elite talent that everybody wanted last year, and maybe he just needs the right play caller. That's the type of guy, if you're going to do this type of crazy shit with the 2 running backs and then Laporta, you got to hit a home run. And, he's at least taken the right swings, I would say, but I don't know. He's really going to need Achane to stay healthy for this to matter. And if Achane does, and he's getting 60 points from his running backs every week, then yeah, it's going to be a tough team to top. But I don't know. Strange.
Moving forward to our pick, the name I've kind of got highlighted here is Brian Robinson. How do you feel about him?
I'm not a Robinson guy. I'm not. I mean, Eckler's such a good touchdown scorer, going to get the receiving volume. I could get on board with it because I just don't have a lot of him. And I think he's good. I actually like Robinson, the player. That's not my argument against him. It's more so just the high value touches. I think if Eckler's got anything in the tank, and he was good until he got hurt last year, I'm really worried Robinson's going to lose a lot. The guy I have highlighted is Trey Benson to kind of correlate with Kyler Murray, and we need running backs.
Yeah, sure.
I'd be okay with looking
Let's
into.
let's go Benson to lock in the stack and then evaluate from there.
Yeah, so we'll go Benson. We'll lock it in. Backloaded production. We know Connor's going to be the guy to start the year, maybe the whole year. But if and when he misses time, Benson, we love the talent. I mean,
yeah, and no guarantee that it's not some sort of split for the back half of the season or just down the stretch in general. So even if there isn't an injury, there's no guarantee there.
Yeah. Daniels goes, which I was going to say, maybe we go Daniels and lock up our 2 QBs and don't think about it, but he's gone. I can get on board because we are building out the Commanders here. I can get on board with Robinson because, again, I do like him as a player. That's not my argument against him. I see a potential between the 20s like grinder, and he can get it done as a receiver, but you're not going to throw to him if Eckler's there. Eckler's such a touchdown maven that, like, if they're even splitting goal line work, that takes a huge portion of what makes Robinson valuable gone.
I don't know. I don't think there's any guarantees about Eckler at the goal line. And he did it as a between the 20s grinder last year. I mean, he didn't even crack double-digit touchdowns, but he was still the number running back 22 in terms of points per game. So I don't know. No receiving work really. I mean, some to be spoken of, but not who do you got queued up other than Robinson here?
The only other guys I'd say is Gus Edwards, my boy, and Eckler. So if you want to go Robinson, I have almost none of them. I'm fine with it. I could add some shares. So
that's my call. That's mine.
I'm good with Robinson here. Yeah, we'll defer.
The case for Robinson is that he did it last year without the receiving work. I mean, obviously some of it, but he was between the 20s grinder and still performed to outperform where he's being drafted right now. He's off the board as the running back 33, and I don't think anyone's scared of Austin Eckler. Obviously, outside of the receiving work, but Robinson barely had any last year, didn't even crack 40 receptions. So I don't see a massive difference in the role change for Robinson. And yeah, I just think the price is worth it in terms of what we're gonna get. I mean, didn't ride a really lucky touchdown stuff into his running back 22 performance last season. He only had 9, and a couple of them were receiving. So I mean, I just don't see a massive difference in the role that he's going to play. So I don't know. That's just kind of my thoughts. I think he's just a very safe pick in terms of the usage, and I think he's a quality runner, not anything that like jumps off the page, but quality enough that he's going to hold down a consistent role throughout the season. We're already making bets on this offense with Terry McLaurin, and I think generally both you and I think that this is going to be an offense that takes a step forward. So Robinson is a guy that I like here.
Kingsbury's also facilitated some great backfield production, wherever he's been. So I'm fine with it. I like the player, so I'm okay to bet on that. I am worried people are writing off Eckler too fast. I think his first 5 weeks he had multiple 25+ point days and was rolling, and then he had a hamstring injury, and then the highlight clip comes out of him running horribly slow. But in the first 5 weeks, he had one of the fastest ball carrier speeds. The dude's going to work his ass off this offseason. So I guess it comes down to, like, how involved is Eckler at the stripe? Is he become, like, the goal line guy? Like, he could and should be because he was so good at it with the Chargers for so long that if that ceiling gets capped, it's going to be rough. But I like Robinson, and I like the offense. I'm good with it, and I do want some of it because I like the player and I like the offense. So the fact that I have almost no Robinson as of now, and I'm good with it. I'm at peace with adding him here. It makes sense for this build, and I do want some shares of him, so I'm fine with it. I guess my only counter is like it's less about him, and even if we throw out Eckler's argument there too. I just love Gus Edwards at this price, but I have so much of him that I need to start diversifying a little bit in this range.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm in love with Edwards at that price that he goes at.
I really think the only difference between Gus Edwards and Brian Robinson is the less of a guarantee and at the goal line. And I think that Brian Robinson is a better pure rusher than Gus Edwards. I don't think that many people are going to push back on that. And I don't think that there's like an outcome. It's not an unrealistic outcome for Robinson to dominate the touches at the goal line. So I don't think that the difference in the probability of Edwards versus Robinson dominating touches at the goal line is enough to justify for Edwards to be your highest owned player and Robinson to be barely on your rosters.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. No, I think that's fair for sure. I do need to get off Edwards just a little bit, and
not necessarily off Edwards, but more maybe on to Robinson more often than you're drafting Edwards because they're going in the same round for the most part.
This does open up too, like whether we end up going Dobbins, Kamani Vidal. Like I kind of want a Chargers running back in almost every draft, but it could easily be either of those guys that end up actually being the Chargers guy you want. I think there's going to be a Chargers running back that's going to be very valuable. Gus is clearly the one I'm putting my chips on, and I think the team put their chips on. But, now that we don't have Gus, I'm intrigued to keep adding different Chargers backs because it's just a bet I do want to make. And then it opens up the Patriot stack late, which I love late Patriot stacks.
I think that's smart because I think we can both agree that Gus is very much a replacement level running back.
Yes, I would agree with that. So unfortunately, all the running backs I was hoping to get, Corum, Chase Brown, and even Eckler, I was actually entertaining the idea of maybe going. Both backs are gone. I'm just going to do you're a fantasy expert. You got to click him. Dontavian Wicks, everyone's in love with him, and rightfully so. I think it doesn't really fit our team necessarily right now, given it's Minnesota. But I don't know. I really like him. So, and I know you're not a huge Jahan Dotson fan, which would have been the other receiver to look at. I'll pull in, though, because we do need running backs here. I just don't like any of these guys. It's now, though, like the range where I'll start looking at like Marshawn Lloyd. We could look at Rico Dowdle. Zeke, unfortunately, didn't fall to us either, who I like there. Jalen Wright, somebody that I love at this range, even though, again, we're not a ton of team correlation here. I don't know who of these guys, like Dowdle, Lloyd, Jalen Wright, or do you just not want to go running back, but
I'm cool with Lloyd, Wright, or Josh Downs.
Okay, yeah. I don't think we need a receiver. I think we need – so you're not Dowdle, though, is what you're saying. Just no Dowdle.
Yeah, I'm cool with going with a high upside rookie type of deal.
Okay. I'm going to go Lloyd just because I've seen Wright fall more often than I've seen Lloyd fall, and there's, I think, a better chance that if one of them was to fall in the next round and we could just go back, I could see Wright making his way to us again. So, yeah, I'm going to we pulled the trigger there. Now Wicks isn't completely just out of left field, and maybe we go after J.J. McCarthy as our QB2 or something, and we have that Week 17 stack. Yeah. Who was the other one you mentioned? Josh Downs?
Yeah. I mean –
so what's your take on Downs? Because I don't have a lot of him. I think he was gone anyways. Unless where does he go?
I can't.
Oh no, he's still there.
I can't remember whose podcast it was, but the case for Downs, I mean, it's pretty fair. I mean, just like I remember last year, just like thinking, oh yeah, like this is going to be one of those guys who is going to be exciting. And then I can't remember when he got hurt, but. He was proved to be a legitimate target earner last year, and just little competition for his role. We know we got A.D. Mitchell going deep. We know we've got Michael Pittman, a little bit of a do-it-all guy, but out of the slot, it's really all Josh Downs. And I think the tape that he put out last year was promising that he can be a guy who can take a step forward in year two. So, and prove to be a targeter. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but consistently got targets when he was on the field. And it's obviously a very different situation with Anthony Richardson versus Gardner Minshew. Sorry, I just blanked there for a second, but it's going to be even with Minshew last year, really high paced offense, ran a lot of plays per game. And in the range of receivers that he's going, I think he's going to be a consistent target earner. And I don't know. It's also due to the fact that just in this specific draft, I just feel like I haven't been getting to him enough. So that's kind of the point there. I just like a locked in role with little competition.
Patrick bringing up a great point here. Penny or Claypool, neither ever is kind of how I feel, Jaws. Not to put you completely on through the coals, but yeah, I would be stunned if either doing again. If I had to make a bet on one, I'd say Claypool and throw up. But yeah, no, I think it's all good takes on Downs. And I know Corain and I think it was Corain and Jacob Sanderson. They had a great podcast recently, and they were talking about Downs being one of the targets. You said it. Minshew was where a lot of that volume was coming from. They already have Pittman as a clear anchor. What if AD Mitchell is hitting his ceiling? Is now Downs the third? It is the slot role, and I like that. And I like the player. I mean, he had some really nice tape, like you said, but I just struggle to uncorrelated with it. I guess we have the week 16 correlation with Calvin Ridley, so it wouldn't have been completely out of left field. I don't know. I've struggled to click it myself. I don't have really much Downs at all. Hearing smart people like yourself and Corain and a lot of people hyping him up, I do want to start adding a little bit more, though. So when I have Ridley and I'm doing these things, especially if I have neighbors for the week 17, it makes sense. Thaddeus Brown saying Mixon gets too much disrespect. Let's hear your take, Thaddeus. So I think fantasy-wise, yeah, he gets disrespected the way he's fallen right now. Even if he's not great as a runner right now, efficiency-wise, it's our pick, so we can come back to that. I personally like making a bet here. Komet's there, which isn't a horrible one. I do like kind of Vidal, though, and I like Jermaine Burton as two guys here that I'm kind of highlighting.
I don't really have a preference here.
All righty, let's get the exciting. Every year there's a rookie receiver. I guess we have Marvin Harrison, so we have that rookie receiver. But there's always a late rookie blow up too that ends up going off down the stretch. So I'm going to go with that because we do also have Ray Davis. There's like 3 running backs I'm pretty cool with. I don't really love Cole Kmet here. We have Ferguson. I think we can get Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry's sitting there. I don't feel like the need to go Kmet. 4th on the target totem pole of what sounds right now like an underwhelming Caleb Williams. We'll see how it ends up panning out. I'd prefer Vidal at this point because we don't have much of him. I was hoping Mooney might fall to us for a little bit more week 17 correlation with McLaurin. But he went, Dowdle almost fell to us, which I would have probably just had to click it, even though I don't love it. Vidal is there. You want to go there, or do you like Hunter Henry here?
I'm fine with Vidal or Kmet.
Yeah, I'm not a Kmet guy, so I'm gonna.
That's fine then.
It's a fine value. It doesn't correlate with anything in our lineup. I just want a Chargers running back, and I don't actually have a lot of Vidal yet. So, it's a 6th-round rookie. I get all that, but Harbaugh's the type of guy. If you're earning it, you're earning it. And as much as I have Gus, like I need to start hedging a little bit. That what if Gus Edwards just isn't that good because he hasn't necessarily been. So
yeah,
but, Vidal could be interesting there. And our running back, this is a 6 running back build in my opinion, because as good as Henry is, Benson, my thoughts on Robinson and not loving it. Lloyd is probably a later breakout. Vidal is probably a later breakout. So I think we're going to need at least one more running back here at some point. So,
I would.
Yeah,
there's a non-zero possibility that he is a 0. Like it's definitely within the range of outcomes. So are you wanting to go 2 quarterback here?
Yeah, I'm feeling this is probably gonna be a 2 quarterback. We got to play as if Murray's making it through the season.
Levis maybe.
Yeah, Levis to stack up with Calvin Ridley, I think is a great bet. Stafford, I believe, was gone.
Yeah, he went
the pick before us when we took Burton. So I think we're probably looking at 2 QBs, probably our boy Levis. I'm thinking a 2-6-7-3 maybe, or maybe even a 2-6-8-2. Like I'm okay with Fergie and just one other tight end. I don't need 3 tight ends with Ferguson.
Yeah.
I love our receivers. I'd be very comfortable. AJ Brown, Marv, Cooper Kupp, McLaurin, Ridley, Wicks, Burton. If we don't take another receiver, I'm good with our room. Like we have 7 guys that I feel great about right now. So
I would like to go 3 tight ends, and I hate going Chig, but like it would make sense.
It would make sense.
I don't know. A skinny stack Levis is okay. It's not the end of the world to not go Chig. But I'm just trying to think this out. We're in an odd spot for running back and tight end here.
We are. I'll throw out a few names. At running back, I like Khalil Herbert late in the case he gets traded to the Cowboys and is going 50 picks earlier this time in August. So I like him. Even if he doesn't get traded, I think he's getting drafted too cheap, even if he's just who he is on the Bears. For tight end, I'll throw out, he's still out there right now. It's unsexy, but Cade Otton is sitting there. It would week 16 with Ferguson for us, which gives us a mini correlation. I really do like Tyler Conklin. I don't think it correlates. It correlates week 16 with Cooper Kupp. So it's not completely out of left field. Isaiah Likely would correlate with Derrick Henry a little bit to get a team stack. I think he's kind of a bet on an injury. I do, my thoughts on Jonnu Smith, though. I really like Jonnu Smith. I like those guys just enough that I really have no interest in Chig unless it's like break glass in case of emergency, and he's there in the last round looking at us, and it fits our Levis stack. Like, okay, it's a good athlete in an offense that will pass more, but we've seen the Bengals with 3 good receivers never target a tight end, and if there can't be a valuable tight end for Joe Burrow, is there going to be one really for Will Levis with 3 good receivers on the roster? I'm not convinced.
That's fair. Cade Otton would have been a receiver that I would have liked for this build, but
and Conklin too, and both go.
So we're setting ourselves up for a Jonnu tight end 2 roster, which is not always ideal, but it is what it is.
Yeah, we can, if Jonnu's our 2, we can look into a 3rd tight end late. There's still guys that Noah Fant, I know, is one of your guys.
There goes Levis.
There goes Levis. So we're starting to get a little thin here.
Yeah, we're gonna be scrambling.
There's Geno, and we could go like Geno, Fant, but there is JJ, and we did set up a few Packers. So, and I know we both like JJ, and I don't really love Geno myself. So, what do you think in terms of Geno versus JJ?
I didn't like
that. It's hideous.
I didn't mind the Geno Fant picks there, or discussion there.
Okay, you prefer that to go in like JJ?
Probably. I don't really know if I want a naked JJ. Oh, yeah. Pause. But yeah. I don't mind the thought of the Geno Fant.
Okay, so we'll go Geno here. They do have a nice schedule, and I do like the new offensive coordinator. So
yeah, and we saw him succeed just 2 years ago, and I think undoubtedly, although it wasn't great for JSN last year, I mean, pretty intriguing trio of receivers there.
Yes, I agree. Obviously, it's as good as it gets. And 2 years ago, he was one of the best quarterbacks you could have.
Where did he finish? 13? What, QB 13 2 years ago?
Might even been better. Yeah, I think he was like QB 10. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with Geno there. And Noah Fant, now all the competition there is cleared out. And so now we've kind of got, like, what I like about doing that too is it kind of opens up like whatever falls to us at this point. We only have 2 more picks. We have our tight ends. We have our QBs. So, I'd like to add another runner and maybe a good tight end. Maybe if let's say Jonnu Smith falls to 202, I'd probably go him. I'd be cool with that. But if not,
I've seen him there before.
Yeah. So that
could be draft boards.
Yeah. So we'll see. I could definitely get behind that. Baker, my boy DeMarcus Robinson. If any of the receivers we really like in that range fall, I'm not opposed to getting to 8 receivers. Tolbert would kind of balance out the Cowboys for us with AJ Brown. I love Donta Foreman in this range.
Yeah, this is a Donta Foreman team if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, exactly. Because if Chubb's starting slow, I really hope Foreman does make it to us. He's kind of my favorite in terms of like I can bridge you to your Chubb is another one of those guys, but Foreman
exactly.
I think like in an even better situation. And I think we need a bridge because I could see us cooking by week 16, our running backs, if Benson's taken over or Lloyd, if something happens to either Jacobs or Connor, I think we got a locked in running back 2, with top 10 upside. But until that day, we're scraping by. We're relying on Brian Robinson being as good as you think he is.
I mean, I don't think Brian Robinson is
you love
this
him.
world. I don't think he's this world-beating running back, but I feel like it's going to be hard for him as long as he stays healthy, and I just don't think he gets completely surpassed by Eckler in terms of the rushing work. So as long as he stays healthy and maintains some role at the goal line, I feel like it's very, very high likelihood that he finishes inside the top 30 running backs. And I know that's not a smash success, but for where you're drafting him, that's a slight win. And if he finishes as a top 24 running back, that's definitely a win. And we've seen that out of Robinson with a role where he takes basically just the rushing work, a little bit of receiving work on the early downs, and he gets snaps at the goal line. And so like you said, and this is just the case with running backs pretty regularly. It's just one way or the other, where do the touchdowns fall? And I'm comfortable in the range that you have to take Brian Robinson, that just hoping that he gets the touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too. And even if he doesn't get the touchdowns, he's going to get enough rushing volume that he'll be an okay running back too. I think my love at Foreman unfortunately goes, as does Tracy's, 2 guys I really would have loved here. But I think he's fine. I think it's more so I just really do believe in Gus in this range, but I need something other than Gus in my portfolio. So I
was smart.
It's good. It's good to it. And then of course there goes Jonnu. So I'm trying to think of I love Dylan Laube as well. I know it doesn't correlate with much of our team. But I think he's going to be a guy that kind of produces from day one with a receiving role. So I'm just going to queue him up as a possible pick that we could go here.
Yeah.
We shall see, though. I've got a few guys in mind. I just don't want to say them out loud because every time I say it out loud, they go. So we got this one pick in front of us, 14 seconds, and we'll see who he lands on. All right, Khalil Herbert's there. That's the one I really do like here.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
For the upside of get traded to the Cowboys, and if not, still an okay pick where you're getting him. So now we just got to pick our last guy. So we have 2 quarterbacks, Kyler and Geno. This isn't one that I'd be opposed to tossing in Drake May or Justin Fields for an upside boost late.
If it's going to be anyone, I think it'll be Fields. I don't really know if I want an unstacked Drake May personally.
Yeah, we don't have any Patriots. I'm used to having at least one of Baker and Polk, if not both. And no Hunter Henry. So, I don't think we need to do that either. In terms of who I have queued up, so I have DeMarcus, I have Laube, and I have Drake May and Fields. So I know you didn't like Drake May, so I'm going to unclick him.
Yeah, I'm not trying to take him naked. I'll defer to you here. I don't know.
I feel so good about AJ Brown, Harrison, Cooper Kupp, Terry, Calvin Ridley, Wicks, Burton. I don't know that Robinson's going to do much for us at that point.
Yeah,
I'd rather just toss in a Hail Mary at Labe. I don't see any tight ends. Jonnu went. There's no tight ends. Dolchitz, come on.
Yeah.
Let's
go loud.
Let's go Dylan Labe, whatever his name is. And now it's okay, Henry and one of these 6 guys every week. I think we'll find something, and then we have the upside of one of these guys hitting huge by stretch runs. Fields would have been kind of intriguing there, but I don't know. I'm okay with going 2-7-7-2 here. I don't typically love 7 running backs, but I think this team kind of needed it.
We didn't really address it after round 3 until round 9.
Yeah, that's where. So I'm trying to think of where we could have, Mixon here where we went Ridley might have been interesting, but I love Ridley, so I'm okay with it.
I'm not too mad about it.
No, and I know you're not a huge Mixon guy, so that works out. Kamara, maybe, but 63 would have been a little rich, I feel like, for Kamara, even though I do love him there. Like, I do. I thought it worked out great with Murray and Ferguson. Like, we got a lot of our guys in a row,
Yeah,
you know, Ridley,
oddly
Murray,
enough,
Ferguson, and they all were kind of correlated. So, you know,
hammered our guys to the middle rounds.
I like that a lot. I wish Levis did fall to us. I'm trying to think, like, where we went Vidal would have been too early to go Levis, but yeah, where we went Gino is kind of where Levis normally went. But I like the Noah Fant bet. Like, I don't have a lot of him yet for late tight end. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not seeing a ton I would have changed here. I like what we did.
I would have, if this was my draft, I would have gone Komet over Vidal there. 20 picks past ADP without a solidified second tight end. That's what I would have done, but it's not the end of the world. But that's really the only pick where I would have. And yeah, I understand going running back ahead of Ridley. And you said I'm not a big Mixon guy. I wouldn't. I'm not out on Mixon, but I just, like I said earlier, he needed the absolute domination of his backfield to be a high-end fantasy player, and he was a high-end fantasy player consistently in Cincinnati. I'm not. It's no guarantee in Houston, but yeah, I think those are really the only two picks where I think that there's a legitimate case to go a different direction structurally.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got some Thaddeus coming in with some great comments and rebuttals to some stuff. So I love it. So we're going to pull that in, but we'll pack 250 a year. Love to see it. If you don't mind hitting that thumbs up button, if you're with us on Twitter and you don't mind popping over to the YouTube real quick. I know it's a little annoying and inconvenient, but that thumbs up really does help us continue to grow. We're trying to push towards 4K subs. We're a couple hundred away. So if you're willing to sub over there on YouTube, we'd love to have you there. We're going to continue to try to pump out better and better YouTube content throughout the summer. So we'd love to have you there. Get your questions on in, though. We got only a handful left here. We'd love to answer as we wrap up our draft and kind of grade this one out. I loved our start there. Oftentimes with the best teams, like when I looked at my portfolio from last year, where I ended up advancing nearly 40% of my teams. It was a really good year for advancing, and I just I didn't have enough Lamb. I was kind of out on Lamb, and if you didn't have Lamb, you didn't really make too far of a run last year. So I advanced a bunch and then just kind of petered out. A lot of the ones that advanced were the ones that I would have been like, oh man, I don't know how I feel about these running backs. It's kind of ugly, and you squeak by, and then boom, like Lloyd is going off, or Benson is taking over the backfield because Connor's hurt. So a lot of times, like these uncomfortable ones, one thing for sure that I think again is proven to be the most important in best ball is wide receiver firepower. Ridley's our 5, McLaurin's our 4. Like we have wide receiver firepower. We're looking good there. I feel great about that. I love that Kyler fell to us. I think you made a great case for him earlier in the mid-round blow-up show, and he's there. And then Ferguson. I love that. Just like 3 of our guys that we had hyped up, and they fell right to us. It sucks that Ridley's kind of uncorrelated. I was hoping at least one Jag would have fallen. That's the tough part about that stack is like it's great when somebody falls in round 8, but you don't always get Ingram or Thomas to fall that far. So if you haven't already gone Kirk, it is a little bit tricky. Etienne in the earlier round, so I'm not really going much. But here's Thaddeus talking about that. We can kind of go back to our team. Let's talk to Thaddeus, what he has here. So Mixon's a pass-catching running back, constantly finishes in the top 10, going to a high-powered offense. He's exactly in the situation I think has yielded him great results. So I'm with you, Thaddeus. I really do like it. He's got no real competition. They keep saying they're going to use Pierce. I don't buy that at all. I think the argument against Mixon, which I don't know it's a great one, is that like his efficiency metrics aren't great. So is he that good of a talent? I don't know that it matters. Like he can do it all on every single down, and he's going to get the volume as a result of it. Certainly can score touchdowns. So I do really like Mixon. I think where we went Ridley, if I could just rewind, just because Ridley ended up being uncorrelated, as much as I like Ridley, I might have swapped in Mixon there. Because then we would have had 2 running backs I feel great about. But again, the wide receiver firepower is always the most important. So when Ridley's having 30-point days in week 16 and he's the reason we move on, like I won't be mad about it. But yeah, he makes a good, compelling point. Like it's volume for a running back that has proven to eat volume and do well with it in a good offense. Like I don't know why we would expect much other than what Mixon's always done in his career, which is top 10 usually in fantasy. So I don't know. What do you think, Mo?
I mean, yeah, it's just there's not much of a case to make against Mixon other than his efficiency in the last 2 years with Cincinnati has been that of a replacement level running back, but his 3-down skill set and just in Cincinnati the lack of really a legitimate competitor has allowed him to dominate not only the high value touches but just everything. He one of the league leaders in terms of percentage of carry, like goal line carries for his team. One of the league leaders among running backs in terms of just total snaps played. One of the league leaders in terms of team rush attempts that he held on to as the Cincinnati running back. So he just dominated every touch. And if he does that once again in Houston, he's going to pay off at this price. We'll see. We'll see if he does it. I mean, they did show that they did not like Dameon Pierce in any capacity, and Devin Singletary is he did it last year. He dominated all the touches. So I don't know. Maybe I need to reconsider Joe Mixon as a target because he's definitely not a fade for me. He's definitely not a fade. I think at price he's fine, but yeah, maybe I just need to reconsider him as a target. But like I've been saying, just the only way he gets there to pay off massively is he just absolutely dominates the backfield like he did in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I think he will too. So I do like Mixon. I've gotten a good amount of Mixon too in these early drafts. Anytime he falls around 6, I've enjoyed scooping him. He's often my running back 1 in those type of builds, like where we had Ridley as our 5. I often will already have 5 receivers, and then it's Mixon as my running back 1. But we already had Henry on that roster, so that I like that too. This case, you don't get work if you're not good. I don't know if we've consistently seen like some pretty bad running backs just get fed work because they're just inning eaters and they're not like great. They're not horrible, but I don't think you have to be good to be, as I sit here on my chair, like, you have to be good to play in the NFL. Like, obviously you have to be fucking good. Like, I get that. But like, we've seen plenty of bad. I mean, Gus, who I know you're against here, but like Gus got a ton of volume for the Ravens. I don't know if he's anything special. It's such a volume defining position. So I don't know. I don't buy that you always get good. At least Thaddeus though does like Robinson. So that he thinks he's gonna far comfortably surpass that ADP. Gonna far outproduce Gus. I'd put money on Gus versus Brian Robinson myself. I think Gus is going to eat like 12 to 15 touchdowns on a team that really wants to run the ball with Jim Harbaugh. Like they signed Gus to be that bruising presence, and I think he's going to do it, and I think he's going to do it well. But I like Robinson. I had him on my teams, like my most important team last year, and he was really good for me. So I don't know. I'm not against Robinson. I guess I should probably be looking at him more myself. But
yeah, that is. There are plenty of running backs in the NFL who get touches and are not good. Let's just take a look at some names from last year.
I did with Blair for how many years in Cincinnati or for Kansas City?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is players who I think are not good that got at least 100 carries, let alone touches, like receptions, carries. Joshua Kelly got 107 carries in the NFL last year. Miles Sanders, not good. Miles Sanders, 129. Dameon Pierce, 145.
Chuba Hubbard. How many did he have? Like,
hold on, I'm getting there.
Okay, all right. I'll let you go. You go.
Yeah. AJ Dillon, 178.
Ew.
Alexander Madison, 180.
Bad.
Ezekiel Elliott, questionably good. Probably not good. 184. Devin Singletary, 216. And then the crown achievement, top 10 in carries in the NFL last year, Chuba Hubbard with 238 carries. Yeah. There are plenty of receiver or running backs who get touches in the NFL who are not good. Mixon he gets on the field because he has a 3-down skill set. He can pass protect, he can catch the ball, and he can run badly. He runs poorly. He is not a good runner. Like I'm a Bengals fan. I've watched this guy for the entirety of his career. In the last 2 years, Joe Mixon has been a bad running back, but he can pass protect and he can catch the ball competently. That is what keeps him on the field.
And he can score touchdowns. I mean, he is good at pounding it in. Like, there's no doubt about that.
Sure.
I mean, that says if you don't notice, I'm a multi-year Mixon. And at the end of the day, like that has paid out for you. Mixon is fantasy-wise. I don't have it exactly off the top of my head, but I know we've talked about it. Like, because I've been making the case for Zach Moss, and we're going to talk about we've talked about mid-round blowups. If I had an honorable mention, if we were going to do 2 running backs, Moss would have been my other guy. So I want to talk about him in a second. But like Mixon has been running back 10, 12. Like I remember we've talked about it when we talked about Moss, like because of how valuable the role is, not necessarily how good he himself is. I do think Mixon's fine. I know like a lot of the analytics suggest he, efficiency, blah, blah, blah. I have like Mixon. You watch more Bengals than I have. So the last couple of years, maybe he's lost a step, but I'm with you, Thaddeus. I've actually had Mixon more years than not over the last 5 to 6 years. Because I really do like it. He was one of my higher owned players in best ball last year, and it took a little while, but he started to really pan out last year. But even in redraft, I often do go to Mixon, and I'm going to be drafting a good amount of Mixon. So I like Mixon, and I think he's better than he gets credit for. Yeah. And he's in a great situation, and he's milked a great situation for great fantasy numbers throughout his career, and I think he's going to do it again.
I pounded the table for Mixon last year because, especially early in the year when he was going around like 7 when he was like there was questions about whether or not he was gonna like get arrested or whatever. But I was pounding the table for Mixon, and there's plenty of bad running backs who just ride volume. We talk about it all the time. It's just a volume driven position, and then the guys who end up with good touchdown production to like conversion rate at the goal line, they get pushed over the ledge to be really, really good. Yeah, this is kind of the point that I'm getting to. You can finish as a high end running back and not be that good because you get the volume. And there's a very realistic outcome that we can talk about Joe Mixon all day. I just think it really boils down to, does he dominate the touches in the Houston backfield to the degree that he did in Cincinnati? That's really what it comes down to.
Which I think he will, which is why I think he's a good pick. So
maybe you have to reevaluate.
I don't think we have to go overboard either. I just do like him though in that round 6. I think he's in a tier similar to Henry, but it goes a couple rounds later. So I do put him above the. I know when we were drafting, I was like, oh, we're not gonna. He's kind of like Najee. I think he might be a tier above Najee just because the offense is so much better, and it's like talk about getting volume when you're not that good. I mean, Najee, is he that good? Probably not. So yeah, he's triggered. Yeah, we're all triggered here. I do again. I like Mixon. I think he's a good price here. I haven't, but what is going to be telling though, and what I wanted to get to, like the kind of reverse side of this all, is Zach Moss, who one of my favorite mid-round blow-up running backs. I've taken him. If Gus Edwards is my highest one running back, Moss is my second or third, in addition to the Steelers guys, but they're not the highest because I'm splitting the ownership with those guys. I love Zach Moss in this offense. 82% of the goal line touches went to Mixon last year. He's gone. Zach Moss, for his career in Buffalo, thought he was a nobody. He was kind of a nobody, but then with the Colts last year, we saw it. He had multiple 25, 30-point days as the starter, was the running back 4 in fantasy while Jonathan Taylor was out. So we've seen the ceiling, and he's probably going to get the 70% of what Mixon lifts behind, and maybe Chase Brown, who I also love at his price, get some of the work too. Probably more of the receiving work, but I think we're going to get most of that rushing work going to Zach Moss, certainly that invaluable goal line role going there. So yeah, I know we didn't have a banner for him and he wasn't part of the beginning of the broadcast, but to give you a bonus blow-up candidate, I'm in love with both Bengals running backs and their prices. In particular, I love Zach Moss right now. I think he's going to score 12 to 15 touchdowns. I think he's going to kind of put up Joe Mixon light numbers, but you can get him 4 to 5 rounds later. And I think it's going to kind of, at the end of the year, Thaddeus, it'll be like, yeah, well, Zach Moss was just as good as Mixon was last year. And is Zach Moss anything special? Probably not really. But that'll be telling, like, how good does Zach Moss do? But that's drafting on the role and volume that's there. And I think Zach Moss is going to be that guy. So I'm excited to see what Moss does. You're a Bengals fan. Do you see it as Moss being the main guy?
So this is one backfield that, once again, we can talk about all day long, and I will wrestle with throughout the offseason. So here's kind of how I view it. Zach Moss. So I'll start with Chase Brown, actually. Chase Brown last year didn't get on the field because he was a complete liability in pass protection, and he frankly wasn't that great of a runner. I don't have the number in front of me, but pretty like low in terms of just like other running backs in the league in terms of just rushing success rate. So just there was some questionable just like reps out of Chase Brown, but what really kept him off the field was his inability to pass protect. And I think Joe Burrow is in that echelon of quarterbacks that he can just say, if you're not going to pass protect for me, you're not going to be on the field. Like, just get this guy off the field if he's not going to be blocking for my ass. So that's the concern with Brown. If he can pass protect, he should be able to get on the field more. And we've seen this like with the Bengals in the past. I don't know how closely you follow them, but I remember people were saying, as you pull up Moss as good as Mixon.
I love Thaddeus. I hope Thaddeus comes to every show from now on. Just continue to just push the train of Mixon for the entire game.
We've seen this with a guy like Chris Evans. Like they say, like, oh, Evans is going to be the receiving back. Like what we saw out of Chase Brown last year. I don't like. There was that one play, and if you see like the alternate angle of that screen pass, it was wide open. Like it's him on half of the field with like 5 blockers and 2 defenders. Like if an NFL running back can't convert that into a touchdown, they don't deserve to be an NFL running back. Get your ass back to college. Like, what are you doing here? So the tape that Chase Brown put out and like the speed and stuff, it's exciting. But there's some red flags there, 100%. If someone is going to take on the Joe Mixon role, it will be Zach Moss. But in terms of like the early down and the goal line, I'm scared about the receiving because we just haven't seen Moss as a really effective receiver throughout his year. So I don't think he can take on that full-blown Mixon role, but he definitely is the more likely of the two. And I don't think this is like a really hot take to say by any means. He's definitely like the more likely of the two to play a bell cow-esque role, but we'll see. Who knows? We've seen Zach Taylor do it with Mixon for years, just use him as a pure bell cow. So we'll see. But I'm really going to be looking for the training camp reports about how how Chase Brown is getting used, especially in how he's improved with his pass blocking, because that's the path to him getting on the field.
And that blasphemy for Moss is good as Mixon. I want to be clear here. I'm saying Moss can be just as good as Mixon in fantasy. If you give Moss the touches that Joe Mixon got last year, the role that Joe Mixon gets, I think he puts up no less than 10 to 15 points than Mixon did. I think he just does exactly what Mixon did.
Any running back with a receiving skill set can be a top 12 running back with the role that Joe Mixon had. Yeah. If you have even somewhat of a 3-down skill set and you get the work that Joe Mixon did, any Joe Schmo in the NFL who can catch passes can put up the numbers that Mixon did in fantasy.
I think so. Let's look at Zeke. Zeke Elliott receive. He would have put up just about what Mixon did if he was getting the Mixon touches in that offense last year.
Zeke 100% could do
it. So which is why Zeke's also a really good price at it, like picking his price, because he's just going to eat volume and can do it all. He's going to catch the ball, even though he's not great. He's washed. That's another definition of like not good getting volume, but being good in fantasy. I think Zeke's going to be that. Like, you can't be. I think that what it does boil down to is like you cannot be legendarily good at running back. Like you cannot be a Devon Achane, a Breece Hall, like putting up 30 points. Most likely, other than again if you get like 3 touchdowns, maybe like Mixon did. But like you can't like talent is going to give you that guy that can like literally swing weeks. So that is, if you look at all the like yards per carry, yards after contact, all that, like Mixon is pretty low on the list in terms of efficiency metrics. Tape-wise, I like Mixon. I do. I think he's a hard runner. I know the line sucks. He gets hit behind the line of scrimmage. So like I am not a Mixon hater. In fact, for many years, I loved the actual runner and the player. I don't think he's still that guy, but I think he can definitely just eat volume and touchdowns and put up good fantasy. I think he's a very good fantasy back. I do not think he's actually like that great of an NFL running back at this point of his career. I don't remember the last time I watched Joe Mixon and said, wow, like he used to wow me. I don't know. Like like Thaddeus, are you wowed by him as a fantasy producer or as an actual NFL talent? Because I
think this is a big difference. I think there's an important distinction to make as well. I think he's a good NFL running back because there's few running backs with the well-rounded skill set that Mixon has.
That's true.
But as a runner, mediocre at best.
Yeah. The numbers, that's what all the numbers say. Like, you know, but I mean, who knows? Like, yeah, I love it. Thaddeus, this is awesome. I hope you come. We're live every Monday at 4 p.m. We were an hour later today because of MDW, but we're going to always be live on Monday at 4. So keep coming, bringing your heat every time. This is great. This is the type of fan interaction we want. Just like this, Dane saying Puka's a bitch. You must have heard that there will be no Puka slander here. And Dane decides to toss out Puka's a bitch. He probably just wants me to go off, and I will. Puka's the absolute man. He's the fucking like, you're a 6th-round pick. You come in, you set every single rookie receiving record that you could possibly ask for, playoff receiving record on the brightest stage, and now he's. How could you not? I think this has to be like just a troll comment to try to piss us off. So Dane, well done. But no, Puka is the absolute man. Like, there's nothing. What can you not like about Puka? His story, just the man. Like, the name is Puka Nakua. Like, that's awesome in itself, and just everything about him. Like, he's so likable. There's not a single thing you cannot like about the dude.
I got one thing.
What?
He goes ahead of AJ Brown.
Yeah. Brings it all full circle for us. Yeah, the original debate we had. Yeah, the only thing you could maybe argue is that he shouldn't go ahead of AJ Brown. Sure,
definitely.
But awesome show, guys. Thank you again so much for being here. I like the team we ended up with. Whether we took Mixon or Calvin Ridley, who knows how things would have gone here with Thaddeus had we taken Mixon. But I thought it was a quality squad. I'm excited to see how this one plays out for sure. We'll be live again. I'm like, that's his dynasty manager team. That's my teammate. It's my quarterback. That's my teammate.
Close personal friend, Joe Mixon.
Totally get it. Yes, exactly. But we'll be live every Monday, 4 p.m., doing a draft, doing a topic ahead of the draft as well. Mid-round blows was this week. We'll come out with something new for the next one. You can find all our content at rotostreetjournal.com for my rankings, for our written content. It's all there. Check it on out. One last plea, if you haven't already, hit that thumbs up button before you head out. Consider subscribing to the YouTube so we can keep climbing those ranks. We'd love to keep getting out to more and more people. Thank you guys so much for being here. We greatly appreciate it on your Monday, nearly over 250 of you. It's really awesome to see you guys here. So thanks again for tuning in. You can find me at Roto Street Wolf. Mo, where can our guys find you? I know you just started a new handle, right?
Yep. You can find all my written work on rotostreetjournal.com. You can find me on Twitter at Mo_FFB. And you can find some short form content for clips of this podcast, other stuff that I'm doing on TikTok at Roto Street Journal. So nice. Go check that out. You'll probably see a good number of clips from this show, including probably a good amount of Joe Mixon debate coming out in short form on the TikTok here soon.
Yeah, awesome. Check it all out. Definitely give my man Mo a follow. He's the absolute legend. It's great to have him on all these shows. Thaddeus, you have a great day too. Everybody else out there, thanks for being here. Thanks for all the great interaction. Hope to see you next Monday at 4 p.m. for our next live draft. And a world full of fantasy sheep guys. Be the wolf.